Hello and welcome to another episode of Let's Decode. We have with us today Mr. Lavlesh Bhanot. He is a researcher, he's an educator. Right now, he is the trustee of the Integral School, which is based in Financial District. So, welcome, Mr. Lavlesh.
Thank you
so
so
much for
much.
coming here.
My pleasure.
And it's nice to actually have somebody who comes with a different perspective as such. When we hear the word school, we know how schools work. And today, I actually wonder why students or children are still going to school, because with parents like us, because when we went to school, our parents were different.
Yeah.
They didn't have so much of exposure or information or as such. Today, when with all of us, with Google, with now maybe Chat GPT, with so many things ahead, what I realize is there is actually no reason why a child should go to school, with the only exception being the experience as a whole. And the reason why I wanted to have this conversation with you was how you bring a wholesome experience for children at Integral School. So if you could just tell us, about Integral, a little more about why this is an alternative methodology and all of that.
Sure. First of all, thank you for having me here. Having wanted to have a dialogue, and just feel so good to talk about a topic which is extremely important for all of us. And I'm glad that you started off by talking about school per se. You also mentioned student, then you mentioned children.
Yeah.
So it's actually in the vocabulary.
Right.
School, student become very official,
Formal
kind of a thing. But the moment you shift and you address them as children, it becomes a different paradigm altogether. And so that's it. So that's about our initiative in Hyderabad. The whole idea is to provide a psychological, physical environment where children can do what they really want to do and need to do. Now, this is a drastic shift from a formal schooling, where everything is laid out for you. And we have realized over the last 10 years, the whole focus of learning is shifting from systems, teachers, structures towards the learner.
Correct.
And it's not so much with the teacher as it used to be, let's say 20 years ago. And I have seen this in my 25 years of professional life, that this shift is very clear. It comes up with a tremendous force, just that our children are not able to articulate it. But what they are now saying is that kindly give us the leverage to decide what we want to learn, where we want to learn, how we want to learn, and from whom we want to learn. So it's a tremendous shift that is taking place. So in order to allow this to happen, we need people to come together.
Right.
And when people come together and we have these interactions, experiences, when we play together, you can, if you will, call it a school. But essentially, our effort is to create a learning commune where like-minded parents can come together and carve out a path which is not only contrary but radically different from mainstream everything.
Yeah.
So whether it's a mainstream school, whether it's a mainstream parenting, whether it's a mainstream family, the sheer pressure that the children are now showing, they're not articulate about it, but we can sense it in the air.
Yeah. And in fact, in all the conversation that we had, the best part that I liked is, apart from admitting the child as such into this particular setup that you're having for learning, I like the fact that you screen the parents also.
Yes, yeah.
Because, that sounds so necessary.
Yeah.
Because what I see a lot of times is when a parent is an integral part of the child's learning, the entire setup is different.
Sure.
And when they are there only to provide for education,
Yeah.
it's a different perspective
Correct.
altogether.
Correct.
So how do you do that in the sense like, in a regular setup? In fact, even for parents to understand this, to even articulate that, oh, you know what? See, wanting to be a part of it is different and actively being a part of it is different. So how do you, handle that?
Yes. So this is, I would say, a very critical question that you have asked. Not only important, but critical. If at all this kind of an effort were to come to any degree of fruition in the future. And if you allow, I will refer to mainstream school and parenting so that we understand what we are talking about.
Right.
Sometimes you need a reference point to
Yes.
understand. Now, because mainstream school is something which most of us understand because that's what it has been for so many years. What does it mean? It means that there is a timetable, a schedule which students there need to follow, and they would come back and help themselves with whatever subject that children or students have to get on to the tuition, and that's it. While parents can continue to live their professional life, and these days it's crazy, 14 hours working, they would not have the time in the day to spend with their children, and they make up for it maybe on holidays and weekends and ending up more stressed than otherwise. So this setup works perfectly well. There's a parallel school in an automated mode, and the parent, husband and wife, also set in an automated mode. They don't interact, not required, because the system doesn't require. The school will take care of their academic needs.
Everything
Only
else.
academic needs. So you graduate, you get your certificate, and you move on in life. So this whole system perfectly fits the mainstream because there is harmonious marriage between the two.
The framework is very clear.
The framework is very clear. There are set boundaries. Nobody asks a question, and people think they are happy, so they go on. But in a setup like ours, or in a setup where you are moving away from the alternate system, mainstream thinking, it means that you would also have to move away from everything that is mainstream, framework, structured.
Yeah.
Why? Because the scope of education in this kind of a setup includes whole of life. It doesn't limit itself to academics. Academics may be important, but we are seeing that how redundant it is now.
Becomes, yeah.
But nevertheless, let's say it is important. So that purpose, mainstream schooling will take care of. Now, if you were to include the whole of life in the whole education process, then everything becomes an integral part of growing up of a child. And what the biggest stakeholder there is then the parents. Because the child would end up spending, say, let's say 6.5, maximum 7 hours, if you include the bus timing, commute and all of that. Rest of the 18, 17, whatever hours is spent at home. Now, if a child ends up growing in contrary cultures,
exactly,
one at a place like ours and totally different at home, then rest assured a child would grow up as a thoroughly, profoundly confused adult, and that's not a good thing.
Also, I'm sure that will help. I wouldn't say help, but it'll kind of shape the child to learn how to behave in a certain situation. He knows how to be according to what is required.
Right.
Somewhere the authenticity will be lost.
Precisely. Authenticity will be completely lost. The autonomous personality that we are trying to create out of a child will be gone.
Yes.
And so on and so forth. Now, this is a difficult task. We not only want to be, but we have to be true to what we are doing. So in order to be true to what we are doing, it's not so much the child that we are worried about.
Correct.
It's the whole parenting that we are worried about. Parenthood comes naturally, but parenting is a matter of choice.
Absolutely. Very well said, actually. Yes.
Matter of conscious choice.
Yeah.
So therefore, we spend some time talking to parents. And within parents these days, we sometimes see a tremendous understanding between the mother and the father, or let's say husband and a wife. It becomes very evident when you have a dialogue. Most of the times, we also see contrary views
Of both.
of both. Now, that becomes another filter for us to see whether this contradictions are fine, they're happy, but when it comes to children, it can be again very difficult.
When it spreads into the environment is when it becomes an issue.
Difficult. Again, the child would wonder
Yeah.
who to look forward to,
Yeah.
what to.
Who to stand up for.
So that is why we end up spending time with parents. We don't want to be seen as a very disciplined and hard school to crack, but we try to explain why it is important. And would you like to know how our experience has been?
Of course, because these days it's all different, right? The definitions of families are changing.
Yes.
So, what is more important for everybody to understand is, as you said, the child, whatever they're taught in a certain school or in any setup that they go to learn, they have to come back and live in another environment.
Precisely, yeah.
And that becomes the core reality. And if they are aligned, if the environment of learning and environment at home,
Right.
we're only accelerating the child's
Precisely.
Learning.
Absolutely, and we have had a variety of experiences. In most of the cases, what happens is we have to, with a very heavy heart, however much we may like the child, but we just don't proceed with the admission because the parents don't get it. So what do I mean when I
So
say they
you
don't get it?
openly deny the admission also?
Absolutely, with greatest humility at our disposal, we tell them that it may not work out because your thought process and how you want to grow up child is not aligned to what we collectively want to do.
And when you talk about parental involvement, is there a certain time that you want parents to come and spend in the school?
Yes.
Or is it just about the thought process and the...
Yeah, so I'll tell you what intimidates parent. The moment you orient parents around this kind of a life, it's very clear that the amount of time, quality of course, I won't even talk about quality because that is required. The sheer quantum of time that the parents need to give to this process is a lot. What does it mean? It means, see, we can't go to their home and see how much time they are actually with their parents.
Correct.
That we come to know through the child.
Mm.
But we request parents to attend regular dialogue workshops that happen at the school.
Mm-hmm.
To familiarize yourself with what integral learning, integral education is all about. To deconstruct your own construct about learning and education in your head because you are from a mainstream school. But you are looking forward to giving an alternate experience to your children. Now, if you haven't done that in any degree within yourself, then it becomes that much more difficult for a parent. So therefore, this whole learning process is a two-way process. We take care of the child, but parents become an integral part, and we continue to have dialogues, and it's not easy. Sometimes after a year and a half, they realize, well, it's not cut out for us. But by that time, the child had made a lot of progress.
Yes.
Then what do you do? So that is one kind of an issue that we have. Another issue is a mother may be willing to spend time, but father doesn't have the time in the day to spend time. Now, then what happens? So these are some of the parenting issues that we see. Surprisingly, we have also seen in young parents who have, let's say, a 4-year-old child, are progressive and are willing to listen. Because one thing that they are very sure is, we do not want our child to go through the same grind.
Yeah.
So that's why so many filters, and that's why we call this a conscious process of collaboration. And of course, the child also spends a couple of days at school to see whether the child really likes the school or not, whether to see whether the child relates to us, whether we come across as adult teachers and principals, serious people moving around, or are we playful with them? And then we have a collective decision. What we have observed, what the parents have observed. And then let's take a decision which we think will be right for the child. So it's multi-layered process.
So how long do you think is the process of somebody wanting to come to Integral?
As far as the child is concerned, we request the parents to send your child 2 days, because you may have a great experience on day 1, and on day 2 could be just the opposite. Now what do you do? Or the other way around. You may have had not a good experience on day 1, but day 2 you realize, well, no, it was different.
Yeah.
So 2 days for the child, approximately 6 hours to get cumulatively, and as much time as we can spend with the parents, as much. So there's no limit to it.
So they'll also be there through the day?
Sometimes it happens. So if both are working, then we tell them to take a leave, and because this is priority. And if they say, no, sorry, we can't, then we know that if they can't spend their time for this, then we are rest assured they are not going to be with us. So those are some of the indicators that we get when we interview the parents. Ideally both, but at least one should spend some time. Scrutinize the school, look what we are doing.
In the larger perspective, how practical is this? Like, with parents, I'm sure they must be having the similar doubts. How practical is it for me to go spend that time with my child in the school? Because if I had that time, if I had the luxury of, putting everything aside, maybe I would even homeschool my child.
Yeah.
But I'm not that kind of a parent.
Sure.
I cannot.
Yeah.
So how does that work?
So are you talking about the admission process only, or?
No, I'm talking in terms
throughout?
of, but I want my child to be there. I understand your philosophy. I am in line with that. But maybe, practically it doesn't work for me to be that integral part of the thing. So what I mean to ask is, if the intention is there,
Yes.
but I don't have the means to do it
Yeah.
regularly. So how do you have such issues?
So see, let's say if you have 10 parents in a group, you would usually have this issue with 15 or 20% of them. So you would see that those 2 or 3 would not invariably come and attend these workshops and discussions. So it's like, as long as we are operating in this range, it is fine, because we understand the practicalities. However, it also pains that, let's say if a parent could not make it, then is the parent making any effort?
How do they compensate?
Then how do we compensate? Can we get on a call, etc.?
Yeah.
And we have seen sometimes parents do, and most of the times parents don't.
Yeah.
So then what do? Then you again look at your numbers. Say, okay, 80% are with us. With a goodwill and love for everyone, we'll continue with this, because these practicalities are there.
Will be there, yeah.
However, there is something called priority. Now, if you have brought a child on this planet, then it's not only your priority, it's your dharma to make sure that I give whatever is demanded of me as a father and as a mother. So, not only attending these workshops, but attending these workshops together is important. We have seen that sometimes there are contrary views from the mother and the father. Perfectly fine, but please find time to address these.
Correct. And I think this is more very important and it's more needed, not just in this perspective, but what I understand is maybe you're trying to bring in that togetherness, that bonding, and there's so much more which has to be in the regular setup as well.
Precisely. Absolutely.
So when you designed this kind of a curriculum, or the entire methodology of what you're doing, what's the core philosophy? From where does this come?
So interestingly, we don't have a preset curriculum
As such. Okay.
If the facilitator is quiet within himself or herself, conscious of her surrounding, and interacting with the child, the curriculum essentially comes out of the child. What the child needs to learn. What is the larger context in which the child is living his or her life. That is more important, not your preset agenda and curriculum.
So there's no boundary to what a child can learn also
absolutely not boundary. A 5-year-old child can end up learning something which an 8-year-old child would be learning. The only difference is because he or she is interested in that very subject.
Correct.
Because that subject finds a space in his or her life context at that point in time.
Correct.
So you may not want to learn mathematics at age 6, 7. You may not. However, once you grow up, you have a context. I need to know numbers because I need to know this.
Something. Yeah.
So that is self-imposed discipline triggers in. Now I will go as deep as I want to, and then the child comes to you and say, I'll make your life miserable. Teach me this. Then the onus is on the learner, not on the...
So there's no set timeline.
There is no set timeline at all.
There's no set pace also.
There is no set pace at all.
Then how do you differentiate between the grade levels?
So we don't. We have a mixed group where a 5-year-old will be sitting with a 6 or a 7-year-old. Also because we operate in less number of children. So it has to be like that. But we have seen that it's a blessing in disguise. The younger one learns to live with the elders one, and sometimes the elders would take care of the little one. It's very sweet, very nice to see this camaraderie taking place. Ideal of course is to have a homogeneous group where you have the same age group. But this has worked so far with us. And it's
so how do they finish a year? So how do you quantify their learning, and how do they know that they've covered so many subjects or not covered subjects maybe this year? Maybe I'll take it up next year. So how do you set up maybe a framework in your methodology?
Sure. So there are two things that happens in the beginning of an academic year and at the end of an academic year. In the beginning of an academic year, we design something which is called goal setting. In a year, we are going to perhaps cover these many aspects of a subject, depending on the interest of the child. And we also end up mapping this to, let's say, an NCERT or ICSE.
Okay.
Not that we are oblivious of the framework that's there outside. No, we are quite aware of what a 4-year-old, 7-year-old should be knowing as per an NCERT or any other syllabus. However, that will never become our guideline to sort of impose it on a child. So we create a goal setting in the beginning, whether it is numbers, language. But what is important for us is the physical, the mental, the psychological, emotional, what we call the vital aspect of the child, and how much the child can live out of awareness, how much the child can be brought to a degree of consciousness. And then we discuss this with the parents. We say, this is what we are likely to cover in this academic year. We would need your support. So having said that goal setting, the groups are synchronized and we work towards it. At the end of the academic year, we have what we call intensive report writing month. And we end up writing at least 14 to 15 pages for each child. Sometimes illustrating, sometimes describing in as much detail as possible as to how the child has lived the last academic year. Emotionally, mentally, then we go deep into the mental capacities of the child, how much the child was concentrated last 1 year, how much of concentration the child has brought, his or her ability to observe, the sense of observation, faculty of observation, attention, memory, judgment, how much that has we been able to leverage, bring out of the child. So that becomes extremely important. Then certain elements like how much the child has demonstrated courage, humility, how much will does the child bring to a task.
So these would be situational incidental reports as well.
Yes, they're completely, so we make a point that we record whatever the child goes through on a daily basis, and then the facilitator would sit and sort of
collate all of that.
And then put it in words. And it goes through a series of iterations, 1, 2, 3, 4, till the time we say, well, this is now perfect. And with reverence, we give it to the parents and we go through it. And that's how we assess. Now, there are certain quantifiable parameters. So, for example, in physical, we would also measure their stamina, strength, long jump, high jump, and all of that, their height, weight. So, that's pretty much quantifiable how much the child has grown. To a certain degree, your mental capacities are also quantifiable. So, if the child is not able to concentrate, then what are the reasons? What are the likely reasons? So, all that comes out at the end of the year, which can be termed as an assessment report, or we call it a progress report. We don't use words like assessment and gradings and stars and so on and so forth, because then you end up living these lexicons, vocabulary, and we are not at all that. So this is a very, it's very taxing, but we enjoy doing this report writing.
In fact, knowing you, what I see is there is one spectrum where you're working on these schools like this. There's also another spectrum where you work with engineering students. You are a visiting faculty at different engineering colleges,
Yes.
and you said ethics and professional ethics in engineering is what you teach.
Yes.
And everything. So, could you tell us a little more about how do you manage two ends of a spectrum?
Yes, very interesting, and I'm glad that you asked this. I've been teaching at IIT Delhi for the last 11 years now, professor of practice. I find both the environment extremely different, two tangents of the same. And I can very clearly see what the IIT students have missed. Don't get me wrong, the best of the best make it to the IIT. Minus your reservation and all of that. They have cracked JEE, they've worked very hard, and they feel a sense of pride having gotten into an IIT and looking forward towards engineering profession. However, I've seen that they lack in their ability to think outside the box. Their thinking is very, very linear. Their thinking is analytical. So their focus is more on the paths.
They're trained to do that.
They're trained to do that. Yes, I'm coming to that. Trained to do that. Right from class kindergarten onwards.
Yes.
So their thinking is linear. Their thinking is analytical. Their thinking is reductionist, which means that they would reduce a thing to its quantum element. And their thinking is rational. Whereas the other side of the spectrum, you would have these children who would not be bound by linearity. They would be more non-linear in their approach, which means they would be able to connect dots. They would be able to see at a thing from multi-perspective.
So if I'm seeing it as a difference between a structure and a no framework or a no structure.
Absolutely.
You know, as you said, linearity, like I'm all over.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Then these children would end up looking at things from a synthetic intelligence point of view, which means that to look at thesis and an antithesis, and in that very looking they are able to see how this thing can be synthetic, how this thing merges. Is there a synthesis involved here? Now it's a very high degree of intelligence which we do not find in the human species today. Very few who are there. The whole idea is to bring this more and more into life, into academics and all, because otherwise you end up seeing just one part of reality. Then I see children of this kind who has been brought up in an alternate integral environment are more holistic in their approach, are not reductionist. So they can see things from multi-perspective, they can connect the dots.
They're more accepting also.
And in the very process become accepting, because they say that, okay, this is this, but not this, but then there is this also to it.
It's fine, yeah.
And I'm attached to none, but I can see both at the same time.
Yes.
What a tremendous intelligence in play. Then if integral education is done in its purity, and with a lot of sincerity, then you move from rationality, rational thinking to more towards intuition.
Yeah.
You would agree with me that today the world is extremely dynamic, ever changing. And for donkey years we have heard that change is the only constant. Now, if that were to be true, which it is, then how on earth would you like to fit linear frameworks, rational thinking, reasoning,
Something
reductionism?
stagnant.
Yeah, you cannot. On one hand, you're saying everything is changing. On the other hand, you're bringing tools and mechanisms which ignore the ever-changing
Yes.
gati which is there. You need something more than reasoning. Reasoning is a faculty of the mind. However, you need to bypass that and then let the mind access higher ranges of its own functioning, which is intuition. And for intuition, you have to be quiet. Only then would intuition function.
Yeah. The stillness.
Stillness, yeah. The required state has to be quiet.
Yeah.
Now, if there is a lot of noise in the engineering colleges, mainstream school, then where does a child find time to sit quietly within herself? So this is the contrast that I see in, and when I interact with fourth year students, first year student, somewhere deep down they know that they have messed up in their education. And I'm finding this 10 years ago, students there in IIT Delhi would not openly say this. Today, they openly say this. That I wish, sir, that I should have had an education like you have had. Can we undo all this? And you feel sad for them.
Yeah, because I think now the need is not for their acceptance and not for them to realize and say, even if they are still ignorant, you cannot deny the changes happening in the world.
Absolutely.
You cannot deny the dynamism of the entire.
Right.
The setup itself has changed.
Right.
So yeah.
So these are the contrasts that I live with and I see. So whatever that one can do in the limited time that I have with engineering students, I try to get them to start thinking critically about certain things, about the whole idea of professionalism in engineering and ethics of engineering, and how would you carve out your career path in terms of living and discharging your duties as professional engineer ethically, because we have seen the unethical aspect of medical science and engineering and all of that. So it's a difficult task, but doing it slowly.
And what has brought you to be so conscious? Like, what has been your core, which, see, there must be, if somebody is responding to things, in such a conscious way, there would be a seed somewhere.
Yeah.
There would be some start point. So
Sure.
What was your journey? What brought you into this?
Yeah. I've been asked this question many a times, and whenever this question is asked, I am more than willing to share, because it's not so much about me. It's about me as an individual, but more to do with the narrative that I have lived last so many years. I've had an alternate life ever since I was born. So one part of it, I think, if I could become conscious, is I'm carrying forward from, many lifetimes. And it's getting manifested in this little time frame that I have in this body. But there's something very interesting that happened in late 1970s. Now, let me take you back to the 70s and try to imagine if you were born in 70s. If not, then imagine.
I'm a little after that.
Yeah. So back then it was profoundly mainstream, everything. Mainstream. Half of my family is from armed forces. I always wanted to be a soldier and all of that. So when I was 3.5, 4 years, my parents would obviously like to admit me to a school. So the obvious choice then was the Army school, Air Force school, or the Navy school. These are all structured
Absolute
schools.
structure.
All structured. And I would go and sit for an interview, or they would drag me out of the home for an interview. I didn't have a 4-year-old, 5-year-old would never have a choice. But our integral school gave a choice. So that's the shift. And I failed in all such interviews. I would cry the hell out of me and I would not be happy. So I think after having taken me to 15, 20 schools in Delhi, they gave up. That this guy is not fit for school. They gave up. And they were sad that he's not going to a mainstream school. Best of the schools, modern school for that matter, modern school, Barakhamba Road, the top-notch schools in Delhi, they tried their level best. I would cry, I would just not. Then whatever I remember, my parents said that somebody somewhere sometime told my parents that, there is a school in Sri Aurobindo Ashram next to IIT Delhi called Mirambika. And its admissions are on, and it's not a mainstream school. Why don't you try? My good fortunes, my parents decided to take me to that place. And I enter the campus, I walk into the campus and I see green habitat all over. Beautiful trees and flowers, very nicely arranged and pretty much not landscape but very natural. And I see white building structures, some in round, some in... And I see a lot of open space. And they take me to a place where I distinctly remember. There was a basement and I stepped down. And there was this extremely humble, beautiful, slim and tall motherly figure standing. Her name is Nelce, a Dutch lady. And I look into her eyes, I still distinctly remember, blue-eyed woman. And I go to her and she hugs me. It was done.
You were home.
I was home. And never looked back. Now
It's so fascinating to see how vividly you remember.
Yes.
And you're living the feeling.
Yes, because that is something which to me is the whole learning metrics all about. Your space. And in retrospect, I think when they took me to those structured schools.
And you didn't cry there.
Yeah, the structured school were all like a jail structure. You would walk in, no light, no wind passing through, no air passing through, no greenery. And there is a greater than thou figure sitting inside. So you have to wait. So the whole time that you have to wait, oh, she's a principal, ma'am. So there's the whole structure, the whole hierarchy. It was to my good fortune again that the freedom that I had, I was not the divine intervention that it was kept intact. Because children who are brought up in such an environment value freedom the most. They value their freedom the most. They don't want to be told what is to be done. They don't accept hierarchy at all. Not that they become revolutionaries or whatever. They can be great followers also. But they don't like people to impose things on them. Yeah. This place was so welcoming. So back then in 80s, 90s, if you grow up in that kind of an environment, then you become more, to start with, aware of what you don't like doing.
Yeah.
So your career choices are based on what you don't like doing. Whereas your career counselor would tell you, these are your interests, this is what you should do, etc., etc. So it was, for me, more of a rejection process that you end up doing what you like to. And a longish answer to your question, but...
No, I mean, it's nice that, as I told you, you started living that feeling. So I'm presuming that this is what you're striving to give your children, your students back at school. Now tell me, having lived this kind of a life, having learned this way, uh, and still existing in the regular world, do you see yourself struggling to balance somewhere?
Right. So, again, I'm so glad that we're having this conversation. Same question has been asked slightly in a different uh, tonality and words. So, I've been asked, so how would you end up adjusting yourself to a mainstream world which is out there? How will you adjust to the social, cultural dynamics and all of that? So I started interacting with parents in I think 1999 onwards, 2000 then, and I was asked the same question, and today also the same question.
Because that's how people see. I mean, I
That's
see
how people
clear
see.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Of this
You're
and
right.
this.
Yes.
I mean, a regular style of parenting and a different style of parenting itself brings in so many eyeballs.
Even parents, when they come to us, they say, "This is perfectly fine, but."
How will? Now, I'll tell you the reason why I'm asking you this. So eventually, the regular methodology of schooling changed long ago. So now we have something like the IB, which is here, the Cambridge system is here, where the methodology is different to what we learned when we were children.
Yes.
So today I see parents who are willing to and who want their children to go to these schools, but they are not equipped enough to understand that this way of schooling is different to what you learned.
Yes.
Like now, if you see a Waldorf system, your child might not be able to count. But so I see parents who want children to go to such schools, but then they are always in comparison.
Correct.
My neighbor's child is in the same grade,
Absolutely.
but he's able to count. My child is not able to count. They've done this in syllabus. My question is, you know where you've put your child. So at least trust the school, or you take complete charge.
Right.
So this confusion in parents is what is creating this question that I've asked you.
You're right.
Because I completely understand, but to unpack it as to why people see it so demarcated.
Right. So at age 30, let's say if you're a mother at 30, of a 4-year-old or 32, whatever, you can't really go back and go to a school. And so what's the other way? The other way is to, which is still possible, to, I don't like using the word unlearning and all, it's been overly used now, but to sort of, if possible, empty your mind and also go back and reflect on your thinking, how you have been thinking all these years, the belief that you live with, the concept that you live with, your own mental knots that you have been brought up. So that's why this process is painful for a 32-year-old.
Yes.
So they end up not only living with their belief, but profoundly believing in their belief that this is how it is, and therefore the anxiety triggers in. So much of an attachment with the child. Nothing wrong with it. Every parent wants their child to live a happy life, a successful life.
Correct, but they also need to understand, right? Because at the end of the day, they are confusing the children.
Absolutely.
I've also seen parents, now if you've put your child in a certain school, and the certain school has its own calendar, right?
Yeah.
They start comparing this calendar with the regular neighbor, neighbor schools and everything, saying that they've started their vacation, this school has not started.
Precisely,
Their timings are this is this.
Yeah.
I'm like, what are you even trying to do? I mean, so I feel the parents need to be educated. Parents need to, calibrate a lot, and it's not the school and the children here.
Absolutely. If you, I was telling someone the other day that I wish I could open a school exclusively for parents.
Yes.
Exclusively for parents.
Very much required.
And then one day I was bold enough to tell a group of parents that just give me your children for 10 years. They'll not bother you the rest of your retirement.
Yeah.
I will make sure that your retirement is happy.
Yes.
Is more stress-free.
Yeah.
Give your children for 10 years, which essentially means 13 years.
Yeah.
So, Padmaja, the thing is, it's just about those first 13, 14 years.
Yes.
Just
Absolutely.
about those first
Absolutely.
13, 14 years.
Because that's the core, right? That's the base.
That's the base.
Yeah.
That's the base. After that, it's hormonal, physical, a bit of tweaking in here and
Yes,
there.
yes, yes.
But your foundation is first 13, 14 years. Parents don't have that kind of a patience.
I understand, yeah.
That is why I mentioned in the beginning that this ultra filtration process of getting parents is so crucial, so important. So coming back to your question, that how will such children, or how did you fit into the, what I answered 20 years ago, what I responded, my response will remain the same. I ask a counter question, which is, how come you have been living this kind of a non-creative life for all such years, so many years? How?
Yeah. What they don't understand is just because it's accepted widely,
Precisely,
doesn't make it right.
Doesn't make it right. So how do you? And there I get a blank.
Yeah. I get those stares. The reason why I'm able to even ask and comprehend whatever you're telling is because I get those stares.
Yeah.
Like, okay, I mean,
Yeah.
So, be it my parenting style, or be it in terms of how I live my life.
Right.
It's always seen, it's always spoken of as if, it's not conventional. It's not conventional, but this is what suits me.
Yes. And then the question was, what about corporate life, earning and all? So I end up saying back then, now I don't, that I don't want to be a rat in the rat race. Even if I win the race, I'm still a rat. I'll still be a rat.
Still be a rat.
So I think I'm not a rat, with due respect to the animal species. I'm more than what I think I am. I can recreate myself into different molds, not get stuck into one kind of a pattern. I can also, if I profoundly become conscious and aware within myself, undo my heredity, my genetics, my environment, my karma.
I love what you said, because I believe in that. That anything that you must have got through genetics also is something which can be rewritten by a habit.
Absolutely. So these three things are important, as Sri Aurobindo very categorically pointed out. All that you carry, the environment and culture in which you are brought up, and then your Atman, let's say your soul, your psychic being that wants to explore more and more and grow into the divine being. These three things are critical. Yeah. Now, integral education focus, now this brings to the focus of integral education, is to bring your true personality, not the one that you inherit, but the one that you truly are, which is not conditional.
Which you will design for yourself.
Which does not come from any religion, which does not come from any cultural upbringing. To come into forefront, to start determining how you think. So your thinking then is more of a conscious process, rather than what your formulas tell you, what your mathematical physics formula tell you. Because science is not, it's again reductionist. It's not the final word. It is still evolving to the next level. In 1780s, we would never know whether a quantum mechanics, physics existed. But today we at least know, and they have reached so far.
But again, it is trained in a way that there are researchers, there are scientists who are going to find out. You're only going to learn what is given to you.
Yeah.
That's where it ends.
So the whole paradigm changes. So no longer the Earth is at the center of the solar system. It was given to us well.
No longer is it flat as well.
Oh, it's not longer it is flat. So no longer is the sun and Earth evolving. The whole solar system is evolving.
Yes.
So things have changed, right?
Yes.
So when we start interacting with people out there, and it was a difficult transition for me, because I had to, from this kind of a schooling, had to go to mainstream for 2 years, my 10th, 11th and 12th. So I was different in 90s, not cut out for, and I would look at people differently, but then they would look at me differently because this is the odd man out.
Yes.
And I would not stand up and say good morning, ma'am, and all of that. And the ma'am would not feel good about it.
Yeah.
Then I said, why can't I just look into your eyes and smile and it's all done?
Yeah.
No, you can't say this in a mainstream school.
Because that's a collective large perspective there. Yeah.
So, if you start looking at the person behind the role, that is what every child is trying to look at.
Yeah.
Not the mother, not the teacher, but the person behind. So you end up living the role,
Correct.
not what you truly are.
Yeah.
But somehow we had the capacity, I would say, for a want of a better word, to deal with contradictions in life, to work in teams and work individually. And I've seen even this IIT grads there, they would not know how to do this both at the same time. Either they are very good at individual tasks, which
Or
they
they
are,
are with the team.
or but they're not, they can't do both at the same time. Because of competition.
Right.
A mainstream school guy would keep everything to himself. Last day he would study, not tell anyone else. And I'm telling you, even today, IIT hostel students tell me that, sir, you know what? Nobody is ready to explain this particular formula for me. I know it's going to come tomorrow in my minors or major, but nobody is lending his or her time to explain this to me. Our children, or someone who's come from an alternate integral education, to be very specific, and this has happened, this is a story, if you allow, very quickly.
They'll be willing to put.
So there was a mainstream school, this guy who shifted from Mirambika to another school close by. And on the last day, this guy was going through something, and he thought that this is very critical, important. It might come in tomorrow examination. So he went out to the market, photocopied about 50, 60 this, went to a different, to his neighborhood and wherever he had to go, and gave the piece of paper, said, you know what, read this, it might come tomorrow. The principal came to know about it. He said, it's the first time in our history
That somebody's actually
this someone
done.
is. And on sports day they realized, so they were running, there was a relay sort of, and this guy was running from Mirambika, who is now in a mainstream school. The other child falls. He stops, pick the child up and run. None of the other cared, because they wanted to come first.
Yeah.
So the joy of achieving something is more important than coming first or whatever.
Yeah.
The very joy. How much of yourself are you putting into that particular task and activity?
Yeah.
How much of concentration you are bringing to it? How perfectly you want to finish that particular task is all that matter.
Yeah.
And I tell you, it's 100 times more than coming first.
Absolutely.
Because it's joyful.
Yeah. Because it's so nice to see that somebody is making those structured efforts to actually make this mainstream. Because here, as my question went, I do not know how much of it will they, I wouldn't say fit in, maybe be a better person, I don't know if they'll win in the competition or anything, but they have won themselves.
Yes.
They'll be better individuals. And what I see today is, with the dynamism of the world, where things are changing so drastically, maybe people who think are more needed. Because everything else is becoming very redundant.
Absolutely.
Even if there is chat GPT, I need to know what question to ask. I need to know what tweaking to be done. So, it's nice to see that, you're actually creating those thinkers and those people who are willing to.
So you've brought a very intelligent point here, and if you allow, I'll just spend a minute on this. Now, what really is happening right now is that we have been told that your machine learning, artificial intelligence, the larger technological
will take
umbrella
over.
is much better than you, because see, you say something to ChatGPT, and
It
ChatGPT is a very
basic
base
still.
level,
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
very rudimentary.
Yeah, yeah.
What they're talking about is
Much more, yeah.
So I think we have, if I were to put this in two phases, we have passed the stage where, this is a word which will come to me, technological ambivalence, which means that we are being deliberate effort to convince us that the Google and the AI is much better than us. So see, the results are there. So most of us are given into it that yes, of course. I mean, why would I think? No? It's just like calculators, for example.
Yes.
So I was once in US back then in the 90s, and there was a small little calculation at Walmart that had to be done. 50 cents is what something costs, and I gave $1. So it's 50 cents had to be returned. But
Punched
even
in
for
that
that,
also.
they had to sort of go through it. So
Yeah.
imagine in 90s and 80s they would
Yeah.
do that. So today we do that. Everything we outsource.
Yeah.
Soon, you give it another 7, 8 years, we would bypass what is called technological inundation, which means that we will come to a point where we'll say technology is superior to us.
Yeah.
So we have now become a chipped
So it'll
transhumanistic
be like,
society.
only if my alarm rings, I'll wake up. Because my alarm is
More than
supposed
that,
to.
because
Yeah.
today your parents don't know, today you yourself don't know about yourself as much as a Google knows
Hmm.
about your behavior and everything.
Yeah.
And they're talking about inserting technology inside you. Why? Because it's great.
Yeah.
Currency has changed to plastic money. Plastic
Yes.
money will now change into digital money,
Yeah.
and so on and so forth.
Yeah.
So it's designed that way.
Yeah.
Not spending much time on this. What I'm trying to say is that the human agency of thinking is at a point where which way we go now is something that we have to think about.
Absolutely, because how much ever these advancements come in, at the end of the day, we are human beings. We're emotional beings. And I think that's the core of maybe what I'm trying to do at Align as well. Because how much ever you put everything else on an auto mode, handling yourself, understanding yourself becomes the core
Absolutely,
criteria. there.
exactly. So, what will be more important, immensely important, will be that my freedom is with me.
Yeah.
I don't outsource that.
Yes, I like that. Yeah, your freedom is with you.
Is with me. To
Yeah.
be able to choose should be with me.
Yeah.
Because I'm a human being.
Yeah.
And I'm not done with my humanness.
Mm.
There is more to me.
Yes.
And I'm on a higher evolutionary curve.
Absolutely.
There are higher excesses of the human consciousness that I must realize within myself. So integral education is an effort to do that. To become more conscious and not get conditioned, algorithmized by all that is happening.
Actually, kudos to all these efforts that you're putting in, because setting up something like this could be easier in comparison to sustaining it.
Precisely. So sustainability again, parents.
Yeah. So now I think, you've very much kind of given us this perspective as to why it is important for parents to understand their participation. Otherwise, it's definitely going to be
Yeah.
this thing. Thank you so much. It was wonderful having this conversation with you.
Same here.
And
Thoroughly
all the
enjoyed
very
it.
best with integral education.
Thank you so much.
And wishing you the best.
Thank you.
Thanks.